Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. A wedding at Mr. Matt's house was bound to make a lasting impression, above all on the owner of the mansion. The best people of the city fought for the right to sit at the same table with the most successful man in this part of the world. Wedding is not only beautiful gifts, fancy dress, and invited stars. It is also a great opportunity to discuss new contracts and share another piece of the pie, which economists will later call super income. Mr. Matt only needed to snap 2 fingers to have his table immediately covered with the best delicacies and delights. And the rumor was complicated by stars and celebrities. George was in charge of vegetables, the freshest tomatoes, peppers and cucumbers from his greenhouses, herbs and lots more. Charles claimed to have personally slaughtered a lamb, 2 piglets, and got into a real battle with chickens and turkeys, as long as there was enough meat and poultry on the table. Giovanni Greca, concerned about fish and seafood, salmon, tuna, shrimp, huge lobsters, and other select delicacies. But Luca Moretti and his family prepared a giant cake, which was too much even for this crowd of 200 guests. He delivered it together with a transparent refrigerator to the generators and placed it near the main table. Lower-ranking guests provided fresh bread and rolls, salads, appetizers, and other snacks, without which a wedding would never be a celebration. 2 themed areas were set up on a huge plot of land near the house. On one performed modern music compositions, on the other retro and classics of Franz Bianca. The most talented sound engineer of the present day arranged the musical streams so that they did not overlap. "We Italians have to help each other," smiled Mr. Rinaldi, who was in charge of the groom, and coincidentally the bride's gorgeous dress. Like jewelry or heirlooms, vestments. Here we brought in a special box, inside of which was maintained microclimate. "I'm an American," Mr. Matt said loudly, "and put this place out of your mind." "I beg your pardon, Mr. It's ingratiating," said Rinaldi. "I meant to say we Americans should help each other." He had reason to be nervous. Today, the Rinaldi family was to go 1 step higher. From now on, he would take on the toughest challenges. Construction contracts on the coast would cover his skyscrapers. Sports arenas would spring up here and there, each of which he would keep a small stake in for the sake of management and profit. And his son, will get the most gorgeous and wealthy girl in this part of the earth. "Where is James?" unceremoniously asked Mr. "He's the one who should be standing here like a bayonet waiting for me to give the word. But you know the traditions, don't you?" Once again looked ingratiatingly at the millionaire Rinaldi. "He'll come with an orchestra. There will be a beautiful song and then a dance. Even if we've become Americans, that's no reason to forget the music." "Ah, tradition," mumbled we this. He wished this interminable day would come to a logical conclusion sooner. Talking in a panebristic manner to Mr. Rinaldi, the construction magnate, he was only hiding his own insecurity. Wacko needs Monica as much as she needs him. Or rather, he needs Mr. It needs this alliance to solidify its position and become all-powerful. The construction empire will take its rightful place in his business package along with manufacturing, tourism, and gambling. Yes, he is strong and powerful. No business is solved in the city without his weighty word, but his own financial strength is woefully lacking. The Rinaldi family are other wordless toilers. They can cover the whole world with these boring and tasty tasks, which, nevertheless, are very well worth and perfectly sold. They have huge circulating resources that will help it get stronger. "Oh, Rinaldi," said this and clapped his hands loudly. "There's a tradition you and I have forgotten. Let's drink a glass of wine with cheese and meat in honor of our union with you, so that this day went as per notes." The groom's father smiled. He was beginning to feel uncomfortable with the nasty mood of it. But here he seemed to feel a little better when he remembered the meat and wine. As if by magic, a waiter with a huge tray appeared near them. How he could only hold the enormous tray. He meticulously selected a red dry wine with a long aging, Mr. It himself filled 2 glasses to the brim and held one out to Rinaldi. "Let's raise a glass to the fact that our cities are united," proposed the master of the house, and like branches of noble grapes intertwined, and from them turned out a beautiful wine, which will be chased by the best houses of the world. Bottoms up. A fine toast, praised Rinaldi. Unlike his vis-a-vis, he was not good at impromptu speeches, preferring to pay money to a professional writer. He's prepared an excellent speech for the ceremony. It's waiting on his tablet, but he forgot the welcome toast. "That's all you're gonna say?" Surprised. That's how he froze with his glass raised. "I want to say," stretched Rinaldi and tried to gather his thoughts, "that our children with you will erect the world's tallest skyscraper. Rinaldi's name will be Rinaldi, and there will always be lights on all the floors for us." Meta touched his expensive glassware to his new relative. The toast was beautiful, but the fact that the family's proud surname was to be relegated to the background. Disappointing. It was an issue he'd forgotten to discuss when he dealt with all the formalities of the wedding. Nothing. The grandchildren may well want to carry his surname. Good thing it sounds beautiful. "Well," Rinaldi said, the master of the house, emptying his glass and snacking on ham, "it's time for me to check on our star guests. You haven't forgotten who will be performing on our stage tonight, have you?" Of course, it would cost a fortune for an outsider to bring in so many celebrities, but many of them owed Mr. This the beginning of their careers, and therefore agreed to perform for free, and the millionaire only had to pay for the flight and hotel. It was already 5 o'clock, and the guests gradually began to arrive. They all approached Mr. Matt, shook his huge striped palm, and wished prosperity to the new family. The master of the house wore a luxurious suit, despite the heat, but on his broad forehead did not even appear vapor. How wonderful is the weather. Mrs. Smith, the wife of the owner of a large retail chain, smiled. "Specially for you," smiled back at Matt. "Thank you for the cheeses you sent to our table." "Oh, it's such a small thing," Mrs. Smith waved her hand. "You should have seen the gift Angie prepared for our young ones. Would you sign a lifetime contract with us for your Italian oils?" "Mister, it's an exclusive contract." The landlord smiled even wider. "But no," he thought haughtily. "You can't buy me that cheap." Matt liked total control over the situation, and so every half hour his secretary, a charming girl named Anush, called him and reported whether everything was going according to plan. Chief of Security Ton reported every hour, reporting anything suspicious. "If you see even a shadow." Leet whispered to Mr. Matta, talking to Tom. "Nothing and no one should mar this day." "That's right," Mr. Joe replied, the head of security. "The situation is under complete control." Mitta was very fond of his faithful guard, who resembled a dog in his devotion. The one by animal subtly felt his master. For example, it was he who came up with the idea to remake the name Giuseppe to the American form of Joe. The Mr. was very pleased with that. Yes, that's what he started calling himself. The call came from Angie 5 minutes ahead of the checkout time. "Mr." said the secretary, puzzled. "We have a strange guest here. It's on the list." Roughly asked us this. Full control, in his opinion, did not mean diving into every detail. "But since these nitwits can't do otherwise, no." Anish replied, lowering her voice. "Between you and me, it's some ancient old woman. She's demanding you come down because of her diction. I can't understand whether she wants to give or take something. Put her on." I ordered it. "Yes, Signora Mr. Giuseppe." There's an old lady whose voice is on the other end of the line. "Mr. Giuseppe, who am I?" "Me?" The millionaire's steely voice rang out. "I don't recognize it." "Measure for line," continued the old lady in her sweet voice. "I happen to know that there was such a joyous occasion in your house that I couldn't pass by. You have no idea what a journey I have made. I came from far away, so we are strangers." Cut Matta off. "I'm sorry, Signora, but I did not invite you to my house this day." I know you've forgotten." The old lady's, whose voice on the other end of the wire was getting louder, Don't worry, mister, don't worry. I'm not offended. I'm often forgotten now. I need Giuseppe's help. Asked the old woman and immediately switched to you. Only you can help me. Only you, Giuseppe. Put the phone back on, ma'am. A test of strength. Mr. Joe. The millionaire's broad forehead was showing from. He didn't sweat at all until he started to get nervous. Mr. Matt made a brief gesture to the waiter, literally one with a Coke. The one, as if having read the big boss's mind, ran up to him and swiped it neatly. It was as if the landlord was not on the phone, but performing a complex operation. He said, "Mother, send this old woman away. And if she persists, call the police. The sheriff promised me they'd have a car around here somewhere. But Mr. Joe, outside, the secretary, she says she needs help and she has important information." I said drive. Demanded the millionaire not to bother me about such nonsense anymore. Because, you know, there's a whole line of people wanting to take your place. There were more and more guests. They were occupying a huge section of Mr. They were touring the luxurious interiors of his mansion. They tasted the appetizers and examined the table that was set right in the garden. The stylists finished decorating the photo area, and a good dozen photographers were walking around the guests so that everyone could fill their ribbon with great pictures. Now we need to get to the most enjoyable part of this ceremony. His daughter, his baby girl, is finally going to jump out in marriage. This furtively brushed a tear off his prickly cheek. Soon, very soon, he will be babysitting his grandchildren, teaching them how to shoot a slingshot and kick a soccer ball. The phone rang again. I told you to drive that damned old woman to hell. Trial of strength. Millionaire, Mr. Mehta. Stammering, said the secretary. It seems, there's been an emergency. What kind of emergency? Calmly, the head of the family clarified. He was famous for his ability to keep his composure in any, even the most difficult situation. A catastrophe. Anish screamed. 3 or 4 o'clock, before the fateful call of his assistant, Mr. Ito decided to make sure that both the dress and hair of Monica correspond to the highest level of the ceremony organized by him. His daughter decided well in the guest house where all her friends and girlfriends were comfortably accommodated. Matt let them walk around all night and even paid for the food and drinks himself. That's an unprecedented move on his part. As long as the kids were happy. He explained his act to the head of security, who was worried about safety, keeping an eye on them, but through his fingers. The kids, most of whom were now approaching the age of 25, didn't fail, didn't break anything, didn't cause the police to be called. And if anyone was being domineering, it wasn't his daughter, or she did it without anyone noticing. Now in the room were workers to this ring. When young people want to continue hiding from the adults, everything should be ready. Very young boys and girls were arranging a slide of glasses through which the champagne would soon flow. And one waiter looked Mr. It straight in the eye and smiled impishly. Where on earth had he seen him? Ignoring the familiarity of the millionaire, strode to the second floor. He kicked the hairdresser and makeup artists out of his daughter's room and asked her girlfriends to leave. Then he rose from his chair and meticulously examined Monica, trying to find the slightest flaw. But no, everything was perfect. Did his daughter, his pride and joy, really look like the $5-6 million he had invested in this wedding? Congratulations to you, daughter, he whispered, hugging Monica gently. The main thing was not to wrinkle the dress or damage the makeup. The photos will decorate the main news feeds of the agencies, and therefore should not drop the authority of Matt's family. Challenged with what? Monica asked. With being able to tie your business to the Rinaldi family. Mr. This froze like thunderstruck. From whom but his daughter? A clever and calculating girl. He didn't expect to hear anything like that. After all, he had offered her a choice of 3 suitors, and she herself had settled on Vasco. The young man, of course, was a bit of a god, and in his Mr. This presence, he generally swallowed his tongue like a snake. But all in all, the guy was great, and he certainly loved her. He loved her. Yeah, the guy's a slob. But that's exactly what Monica needed. And importantly, with the financial ability to fulfill all her needs, which can grow over the years. What do you mean by that? Dad asked. What I mean is shut up. Suddenly shouted Mr. I don't even want to hear it. Any girl in your place would be dancing with joy. And you're just as nosy as ever. Why don't you ever want to hear me? Monica asked. And there were tears in her eyes. And there were tears in her eyes. Everything I do for you and for the family, replied Mr. This, trying to give his capital voice tenderness. You should be grateful to me. You know James is not the hero of my novel, sighed Monica. Yes, we'll settle well. He loves me. He's been very gentle with me. But to live with him all my life, I'd die of homesickness. Mr. thought about it. He certainly shouldn't have upset his daughter on a day like this. She will marry James anyway. It was a done deal. But she'd remember his pressure and despotism for the rest of her life, which means she'll hate him. I had to sweeten the pill. Fortunately, he had already taken care of this issue a month ago and prepared a gift that would make any girl fly to the seventh heaven with delight. Forgive me, darling. Forgive my pressure and this arrogant tone. You know how hard it is to make these decisions, but I'm the one who takes full responsibility for them. Here you go. We said it, holding out a ring to our daughter. I've prepared a gift for you. What is it? Asked the bride. It's a real heirloom. With delight, said the father of the family. Can you believe that this trinket was worn by the wife of the first president of this glorious country? Monica looked at the ring meticulously. It looked really beautiful, but was it worth spending a lot of money on something like that? The girl imagined how her father's men had gotten it. Maybe they had stolen it from a museum. And what if they hadn't? She didn't even want to think about that. Wear it with pride. We said it solemnly. It's a gift from me personally. And do not forget for a second, dear, that we are Americans with an Italian surname, sarcastically said Monica. What's the point of all this? Are we Italian, American, or Jewish? What's the difference? How dare you? Mada was indignant. Me and my parents have endured abuse and insults all my life, just so that you could be representatives of this God-chosen nation. And without my last name, no important issue is decided in this city. Isn't that God's plan? I've told you 100 times I'm not interested. Monica snapped at me. I just want to make my own music. You hear it. There she went again, talking about her stupid songs. Joe was already cursing the day many, many years ago when he'd given his daughter a guitar and taught her a few chords. Yes, she sang wonderfully, but he'd seen her financiers with brains like hers. She could multiply her family's fortune 10 or 20 times over. What awaits her on the stage? First, you have to invest a whole ton of money without any guarantees of return. A star's career lasts 5 or 10 years. And then what? But no, you can't take any chances. Even though I'm American, we said it threateningly, losing control of ourselves. But I might as well take an Italian whip and tap dance on your international ass. Sorry, Poe, immediately replied Monica, who understood the reality of such threats. The best men in town and country are doing your wedding. Couldn't settle down. Millionaire, do me the courtesy of at least smiling. Keep your thoughts to yourself. What's gotten into you today anyway? Because I'm in love with someone else. Monica explained. Who? Mr. Matt asked. He was going to explain to her that you can live with one person and love another. The main thing is to do it carefully, so as not to create rumors and speculation. And as soon as Monica opened her mouth, the phone rang. Tony Class, the eccentric billionaire Mr. Joe had pinned his hopes on, had arrived. Not a word. Asked it, raising his hand. I love you, daughter, Mr. Tony, said the master of the household in as kind a tone as his speech apparatus was capable of. What an honor and a surprise. I'm on my way. So the guests have arrived. The tables are bursting with refreshments, and the musicians on both stages still continue to fill the air with beautiful melodies. However, Monica is missing, and there's no clarity on her disappearance. The saddest part is that no one saw where she went, neither her stylist, makeup artist, nor her girlfriends. It's like she vanished into thin air. It's Mr. This is the dilemma of canceling the wedding or hoping that Monica's kidnapping is a bad joke. Santi, her best friend, was crying, clutching a teddy bear in her hands, and somehow nursing herself back to health for what had happened. The local police office sent 2 detectives at once to speed up the investigation. The gentleman went along with it. His weight was too high. "Tell me again," asked one detective, tall, thin, addressing Santa. But no tears. "Honey, what happened?" Musicians in traditional Mexican attire entered the guest house. She was sobbing. "I don't know who booked them. They started playing their songs, doing round dances with us. When I came to my senses, I saw that Monica was nowhere to be found, and I sounded the alarm." "How long did the singing, dancing, and destruction of tequila last?" the tall detective asked. "I don't even know." Stretched out to Sante. "Maybe 20 minutes, or more." "And when was the last time you saw Monica?" Santi looked expressively at Matt, tearing up again. "When her dad, Mr. Joe, came by and kicked us out," she said. "And that was before the Mexican band." "Maybe she went somewhere else?" asked the second detective, the short, fat one. His appearance was so disgruntled that Mr. This felt like giving him 105 to lighten his mood a little. "The phone was left on the bed," declared Sante with renewed vigor. "And after all, she doesn't go anywhere without her phone." The 2 guards that were on duty outside the guest house didn't see anything suspicious. On behalf of Mr. This, they questioned all the youths and waiters, writing explanatory notes on behalf of everyone. But where had his daughter disappeared to? In her gorgeous dress, no one had noticed. Now the short, fat detective was leafing through the notes, and his disgruntled look grew even more grim. For a moment, the policemen looked at each other and took up their positions beside Mr. This case sucks, said the disgruntled cop, short in stature. "If it's a kidnapping, it's a masterstroke. Hats off, as they say." "Do you think it's funny?" asked Millionaire Mr. Joe. "If it is a crime, do you have any enemies? Do you have ill-wishers? Do you have any idea who might have kidnapped her?" asked the thin and tall Detective Stanley, thoughtfully biting his pencil. "Who?" roared Mr. Matt. "Yes, any cretin who has a desire to become $1 billion or 2 richer, or whatever the usual demands are for kidnappers, daughters, millionaires." "Have you been given any demands yet?" Detective Brandon clarified. This bigwig with the loud voice was starting to annoy him. Like a whole bunch of self-righteous assholes. A bunch of them in his precinct. "No, none at all," pulled Matt. "The groom's dead." The cops looked at each other. "Are we having a murder?" asked Stanley. No, waved his hands at the millionaire hobbit morally. "He loves my daughter very much. Was it really painful to look at you?" He sobbed like a girl, trying to tell his side of the story. They'd been dating for 6 months, but they'd only slept together a handful of times. It wasn't the Italian upbringing, it was Monica's nasty temper. We knew that American women treated flat relationships differently than Italian women. Sleeping with 2 or 3 guys before marriage in the US equated to complete innocence, and his daughter was so caught up in local tradition that she could pass for a Native American woman in terms of sexual freedom. But she preferred to keep you on starvation rations, an approach he understood and even shared. Detective Brendan looked out the window from the 2nd floor of the guest house. There was a stunning view of the courtyard. Beautiful music was playing, some kind of country music. The blue pool rippled in the sunlight. Now I'd like to throw off my jacket, shirt, and pants and dive into this sinful water. And call for the waiter with an ice-cold drink. His partner stood beside him and stared at the courtyard, and stared at the courtyard too. They had been together so long that they had learned to read each other's minds. It caught both of their eyes as a girl with a short haircut, dressed in black pants and a white blouse, bustled about the property. She was rushing only to some guests, who to others, explaining something to them. The detectives looked at each other. "This is your secretary, Mr. Joe," asked Stanley, pointing to the agile girl. "Secretary about it." He hated it when they added all those suffixes and endings to normal male professions. "And don't you dare utter feminism in my house." Stanley was silent. Oh, those rich people, the detective thought. Their own quirks. She's the one who sounded the alarm. "So invite her here," Brenton asked. "And please, let's not waste our time on the subtleties of the English language. We detectives mostly use the unprinted version. But it's not like we brag about it on every corner." The guests had no idea that this was an emergency at the multimillionaire's house. The music continued to play, photographers took pictures, and animators kept the audience entertained. Waiters were passing cold drinks and appetizers. You can't fool these people, though. Successful people have something like a sixth sense that tells them the right decision. The richest and most powerful. They were getting nervous. Being out here in the sun all day wasn't part of their plan. Tony Case, eccentric inventor and billionaire, is already tweeting about it. It's past 12 o'clock. Still no young people. Did he write, "Will there be a wedding today? Will there be a wedding today? Or are we talking about a grand dress rehearsal? A few words for the press," shouted Tony, beckoned the receptionist. "That's my joy. What's all the fuss about? I love tedious waiting, but today it was too tedious." And Mr. Tony shrugged her shoulders. "There's such a thing, you know, such a thing. A life-saving phone call." Mr. It barked into the receiver to urgently go up to the second floor of the guest house. Angie gave Kesa another smile, promised to look into everything, and rushed to her patron. Although the girl wasn't in charge of security and was the first to sound the alarm, she still felt a keen sense of guilt to think Monica was missing. This is a charming and intelligent girl, her bitterest competitors in the fight, and for Mind's, her fiercest rivals in the battle for Mind's attention, it seems to have dissolved. "Mr. Joe," she screamed. "What do we do, Mr. Joe? First, calm down," said it in her steely voice. "Second, listen to these gentlemen. I'll call a council and decide how to proceed with the wedding." The millionaire went into the next room and picked up the telephone. His active soul wanted to move, to investigate, to find out. But he understood nothing of police business. On the contrary, he had always avoided meetings with officers of the law. Of course, he had something to hide from the law and the authorities. But now, alas, he could not do without them. "We'll have to put up with it. This neighborhood is annoying. Shall we split up?" Brandon suggested. "You keep staying at the guest house, and I'll start watching the video. I bet we'll find the answers to any question we want to ask." Stanley nodded his mind. Brenton's is organized in such a way that he's better able to work with a vast array of information. Where the average person would have a stupor, this full-blown detective showed marvels of acumen. The detective went into the next room, where there was a high table, and began to arrange his gadgets on it. "Good idea," Stanley said. All he had to do was talk to Fatty's secretary. The huge leather couch was just the right size for tall Stanley. His feet rested on the ground while he leaned on the backrest, a blissful position for a Russian to sit in. The detective felt that this young beauty with the short haircut could definitely be useful to him. But in what way? "My name is Stanley," he said to the girl, Detective Stanley. "We're investigating the kidnapping of Monica. This simple," she replied. "Call me Angela." "What a rare name," smiled Stan. But the girl didn't react. "So, you were the first to sound the alarm." "My partner and I saw through the window how you literally calmed the neighborhood and probably saw all the guests." "That's right," the girl replied. "Mr. Maitredi ordered me to personally check everyone." "Checked," the detective clarified. "At the entrance, I made sure the invitation matched the list. He's a sexist, you know, in a good way. Guests don't like all those guards he wants. A young girl's a different matter." "Well, there you go." Stanley interrupted her. "Did you see anything suspicious? Maybe some plumbers or alleged police officers entering the house?" "The maid of honor says there was a Mexican concert." "That's the plan," she said. I already gave the band's contacts to the security guard. We booked the Mexicans a month ago. The girl thought there was a lot more to the program. She almost cried. An illusionist, 2 Hollywood actors with small performances, a couple of world stars. It was a shame that all her work had gone to waste. Although, of course, there were other people involved in the organization. Then maybe the detective held out. Maybe you just want to tell me something. Not necessarily something suspicious, something that would help the investigation. Water nodded her head. I have something to say. Just not here. Let's get away from him. Away from who? The detective was surprised. He nodded expressively towards the room where we were also supposed to assemble our council. Yes, Anush whispered. At this time, the master of the mansion was indeed preparing to hold a meeting. In any unclear situation, he arranged for an extended gathering. So how was the kidnapping of his daughter worse? The mother then called the deputies who were also present at Mr. Rinaldi's wedding. Then he thought about it and decided to go to extreme measures, even calling his own wife. Who did I forget? Matt thought to himself. And at that very second, his expensive phone rang. Mr. Joe, Diego Maradona has arrived, reported the head of security. Where are we taking him? Do you have any idea what happened? Screamed the Mata. Yes, the Tom replied without embarrassment. There were rumors that he died. But that's Maradona. How could he miss your daughter's wedding? Tom shouted, it's my daughter who's missing. Missing? Surprised the head of security. Where to, Mr. Joe? I have no idea. The millionaire roared. My daughter's missing. And you're fired. Go to hell out there. Brandon hated working in such an environment of a huge number of people, but most importantly, the snacks and booze that literally dotted all around. And beautiful girls giving him long, piercing stares. The detective yelled at a good dozen guests of employees, while he managed to pull himself together. He seized on his hard drive, videotapes, photos labeled who and which ones he had been given. At this point, a citywide siege plan was put into effect. Dozens of cops were searching cars, combing train stations and airports. Bullshit. He's investigated a dozen kidnappings in his career. The perps always made the same mistake. They talk too much. They'd leave a trail. Brands, like dogs. All that was left was to get that scent and come up with the intruders. Stanley said excitedly as the detective dialed his partner. I think I got it. I got something. You hear that? Let's talk to that uncle again. Early in his career, Brandon had memorized his own cases in great detail. Even a month or two later, he could recite any case, quote interrogation reports and expert testimony. But gradually the cases became similar to each other. In recent years, it was already difficult for him to recall the details of solved crimes. And of all the kidnappings, he could remember only one, which ended in a major failure. However, his fault in what happened was not at all. The boy's parents were reluctant to go to the police. Brenda started looking for the intruders on the 3rd day of the kidnapping, and all he found was a breathless body. Here, look, said Brandon, setting the tablet in front of Matt and Stanley, who came in 5 minutes later. I took a quick look at the videotapes. So our little girl went missing between 17 UI 1730. Let's just say he got it. He suddenly felt old and also devilishly tired. So what of it? Do you know why I thought that? Asked the detective. Because at 16:45 your daughter was caught in the lens of a girlfriend. They took selfies. That matches the explanation of her march. And around 6:00 p.m., you realize she was missing. Half an hour later, we arrived. What was the next thing the millionaire muttered? You want to brag that you're a little good at your job. Not at all, smiled Brandon. I asked you to come here for a minute for a completely different reason. My question is this: who did the dress? Why did such a question arise in the first place? Angry. It's a completely stupid question. Just the way I like it. We're just wasting time arguing, said the detective. But I was gonna show you anyway. Look, don't you find anything odd? Brandon pressed the space bar and the laptop started playing the video from the surveillance camera installed behind the guest house. It showed a waiter pushing in front of him the very crate in which the bride's dress had been delivered. At some point, he looked away and the Raven detective pressed stop. The face, of course, was problematic to see, but some features could be caught. Stanley snapped a picture of the screen on his phone and stepped aside to send out an orientation. In a strange coincidence, the other cameras in our hero's path didn't work, said Brandon. I told the interrogator to go all the way to the end. He says there's a fire entrance. It's all covered in sidewalk tile. No footprints. It's hard to tell if someone picked the lock or not. Forensics already took samples. See if there's any trace, but I'm guessing it was this waiter who rolled the crate out. It's all right. Mr. Joe, engrossed in his monologue, he didn't notice his companion turned pale. The millionaire kept staring at the freeze frame. He must have listened to the fiery speech too, absorbed in his own thoughts. No way, Mata whispered, clenching his fists. He felt his head begin to spin, as if the car under his control had flipped over and was flying into the abyss. It can't be. Do you know who that is? Asked Stanley. He was watching the millionaire closely. He was also digesting the information he had received 5 minutes ago from Angie. He would have bellowed this. My girl's in mortal danger, detectives. I bet it was my nephew who cut those. Stanley's been working the last few months. He'd already made up his mind to quit the force. And though he was only 37 years old, he'd had enough. His young children were growing up completely autonomous, communicating with their father by phone and correspondence. His wife threw scandals almost every day. And at work, the big bosses clapped him on the shoulders and asked him to stay on for another year, or better yet, 5 more years. Richard Stanley said the chief of police was hesitant to sign his letter of resignation. You're good, you're damn good. Who needs you but us and your family? Answered the detective. Stanley had already decided for himself that as soon as he found the daughter of this thick-skinned man, he would immediately go on vacation and start looking for a job. And he's not going back to the police station. After all, is it his fault that there are so many crimes going on in this city and so few cops who can investigate them quickly and correctly? And do you like your job? Asked the detective, as they walked down the corridors of the guest house. Yes, smiled the girl. It's the best job on earth. I just can't seem to find a man, or at least a boyfriend at Mr. This, has a bad reputation in that regard. Right this way. She opened the door and gestured for me to come inside. She looked carefully to make sure there were no intruders. It's all right. This is where the mops were put. Buckets here stored sponges and other things needed to put things in order. There was a smell of cleaning supplies in the room that the detective liked very much. 2 days ago, some strange people came to see Mr. This said, when they were alone in a room on the first floor. The room was cramped, and there was nowhere to sit down. If he finds out what I told you, he'll be furious, detective. And he'll definitely fire me. You hear that? Where did you go? Stanley asked. To his house. No, we started with our heads again. They didn't go into the house. He talked to them at the guard post. And then one of the guys told me that Mr. Joe took out a whole wad of money and shoved it in their hands. You think? Asked the detective. Do you think he's hiding something? Yes, definitely. Nodded the girl. He knows more than we do, and Monica didn't want this wedding. She told you that? Stanley was surprised. No, we weren't friends. She used to be very jealous of her father. She even threw a couple of tantrums, said we spent too much time together, even alone. What's that? Laughing. The girl shrugged. He likes his daughters to fight for him, by his own helpers. So what makes you think Monica didn't want a wedding? Stanley asked. She had a lover, answered the girl. I can tell you something if it stays between us. You have my word, nodded Stanley. At my request, The Tom was looking after her, said the girl. Monica was meeting this guy in an apartment in the city. He might know the address. Stanley thought that such an outcome would be most curious. The girl had faked her own kidnapping to get money out of her father. But no, it's too complicated. And it's obviously the wrong day. No, all girls want to get married, even if it's the daughters of millionaires. And this pretty girl is probably just jealous of the girl and wants to make sure she's not found. Is that all? Stanley asked. I think this information will help the progress of the investigation. Can I go now? She asked. I think we've worked something out with the wedding. And I need to get back to him so I can be there for him and do what he says. Suddenly, Arsh approached the detective abruptly, took him by the hem of his jacket, leaned over and kissed him gently on the lips and smiled. You're all right, she said playfully and left the room. Stanley was faced with a different task. Renee was literally bursting with pride in her own person to accomplish such a thing alone. Of course, he'd had help from his brother Jerome, who'd helped get him a waiter at the lavish wedding and provided him with false papers. He hated the Mata family, so he was happy to mess with them. But could Jerome imagine that his brother would risk such a thing? Cousin Giovanni also supported Reen. It was he who helped to push the heavy box into his van and was now driving to the hiding place. But the rest is a solo composition that Reen performed alone. Out of pleasure and joy, he belted out an old Italian song, and Giovanni immediately backed him up with his powerful voice. Without taking his eyes off the road, Reen asked. He couldn't stand it when other men sang along with him. You and I are carrying a very valuable cargo. What's in there? With a gasp, asked Giovanni. Oh, 45 kilograms of pure gold, smiled Rene. He had a reputation as a joker. Therefore, the cousin wrote what he said with a sense of humor. I hope you know what you're doing, said Giovanni, because I'd hate to go back to prison. Don't worry, pronounced Rene. When you find out what kind of scam I pulled, you'll be over the moon. And your young brother will never give you up. You know I'm tough. Besides not being a joker, we all knew about his strong-willed Italian character. Indeed, if he decided to keep quiet, all the police in the world could not get a word out of him. That's why Giovanni decided to help his brother. Besides, if the cops came after him, he could always play the hoser and pretend that he didn't understand the claims at all. Do you really want to know what's in there? Rene asked suddenly. No, I've changed my mind. Laughter. If suddenly Hawaii catches up with me, and I don't know anything. After a year in jail, Giovanni promised himself and his mother to quit crime. He bought an old bus and started hauling freight. The guy loved to work and was ready to spend 14 o'clock a day behind the wheel, which is not typical for Italians. But alas, after the stray criminal money, his income promised to be better. He could even live behind the wheel of his bus, sleep there, and take any job he wanted. It would still only be enough to make ends meet. Reina had given him $300 for an hour's ride, and the joker clearly had more work to do. If you're really careful, they'll never get caught. Listen, listen, Joe said, keeping his eyes on the road. Maybe you've got a theme in mind. We could play it together and make a big score. But no, brother, said Balaguer, pointing to an inconspicuous garage entrance. I'm not into crime. Turning here. You know I have a singing career ahead of me. Soon enough, the whole coast will be talking about me. You'll see and you'll hear. He began to sing another song in his velvet voice. Giovanni envied this young artist. He was really good. And how did he feel about the guitar? Could it be that he had really decided to stick it out to the old folks to get away on stage? And why not? They say that all more or less big American stars used to be backed by the Italian mafia. Together, they gave a guy a gift. They unloaded a large human-sized briefcase and carefully rolled it to the corner of the garage. The guy hugged Giuseppe tightly and gave him a brotherly kiss on both cheeks. The driver wiped a tear that appeared at him from emotion, waved goodbye, and sent. After driving 100 meters away, He jumped out of the cab and returned the real license plates and the stolen ones, on which he had been driving until that moment. He rolled up in a ram's horn and stuck them under the eastern pipe. No dog would ever find them. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Mr. Matta was restless. To think his nephew had cut his way into his wedding and rolled out his personal dress case, most likely with his daughter. There's one question inside, though, that hasn't gone anywhere. How he got her inside. Monica had to fight back. It would have taken a whole gang of kidnappers to break her resistance. How did this young man cut these? Pulled off such a daring plan all by himself? No, whispered it while pouring whiskey into a huge glass. No, he has accomplices. I will find them. I will find them. And I will make them talk. Whatever it takes. Now, Mr. Rinaldi, Stanley said, looking at the groom's father. Take a good look at this picture. Do you recognize anyone? The detective showed him the image taken from Brendan's laptop. The detective looked at the screen and sighed. I told you, I spoke out of anger, Rinaldi whispered. Let's hire professionals. Let's spend it on security. Let's not waste any time. Stanley asked Monica. It was probably kidnapped. That's for sure, said Rinaldi. If it's a detective case, I'll recognize the valise. It's always carried the dress for our princess. Tell me more about it, Stanley asked. It's quite an expensive dress, explained the groom's father. It requires a special humidity and temperature. This case maintains it. Well, it's kind of like a refrigerator. Could it fit a person inside? I think so, said Rinaldi. Especially if it's a hidden girl. Can the temperature be regulated? Asked Stanley. Of course, nodded the father of the groom, and the humidity. The detective scratched his chin thoughtfully. In another situation, he would have assumed that Rinaldi was involved in the kidnapping, but he had absolutely no motive to commit this crime. Now he and his failed brother-in-law were on display. Let me ask you a personal question, Stanley said. Suppose I'm a kidnapper and I want to put up a ransom for Matt's daughter. How much should I ask for? Between you and me, he's not doing well, Rinaldi said. He's rich in assets, but you can't pull a lot of money out of them overnight. I don't think he can do more than 10 million. Who do you think would want to kidnap the girl? The detective asked. I have no idea. Rinaldi shrugged. One thing I can say for sure, if he didn't think he was smarter than all of us put together, it wouldn't have happened. Anger, longing overwhelmed his soul. Rinaldi didn't feel sorry for the 1 million he'd spent on the wedding, and even the gorgeous dress for Monica, which she clearly didn't deserve. He didn't care at all. Reputation was another matter. Unless this trickster could figure out how to get out of the situation, he needed to be distanced from him immediately. Rinaldi couldn't believe that such a thing was possible in modern America. It seemed that the era of the relationship between Italians was in the distant past. Even his father was no more than a respectable American, much less his son. James held his own in this situation. He was, of course, discouraged by the news that his fiancée had been kidnapped, but he kept his spirits up. Detective, Rinaldi asked, let me ask you a question. What are the chances of finding our beauty alive? And of course, well, it usually takes up to 3 days to solve a kidnapping, Stanley explained. The next limit is a week. If the person is not found within that period, the chances of rescue are close to 0. But pardon me, Rinaldi said. You said but. Yes, nodded the detective. If we're talking about classic kidnappings. But there is a nuance. Nipro claims within 24 hours or immediately after the crime. And here there's silence. It's strange. Looking at the general merriment, it brought tears to my eyes. Annoyed, he walked out into the crowd. After a short meeting with his aides and wife, he had made his decision, and yet he was terribly reluctant to announce it. As much as Mr. Joni would delay this moment, action must be taken. The musicians stopped playing music, all eyes fixed on him. The master of the house. Taking the microphone from the host's hands, he exhaled loudly and said, Dear guests, my favorite close and dear people. Unfortunately, trouble has come to this house instead of a wedding. A murmur ran through the courtyard. Not only the guests, but also the waiters were talking. An impressionable woman fainted and her clumsy husband accidentally broke an expensive champagne flute. My daughter, Monica, Nestor whispered. That disappeared for nothing, with no explanation. The police are already working here at the mansion. If any of you are asked any questions, please do not refuse to answer them. Maybe it'll save my little girl's life. Yes, God bless you all. The homeowner's words had the effect of a bomb going off. Dozens of people immediately rushed to the exit. She used to try to sift out the most high-status and expensive guests to take them out separately. She darted through the crowd, which was becoming less and less organized. Some stepped aside to let the flow past them. The lyricist triumphed, though, getting new information on her phone. What started out as a dreary wedding of millionaires risked turning into a posh report into the story of the 100th anniversary. Basically, she didn't care about Monica's fate if she was raped or killed. It would only spice things up. Of course, such things couldn't be said out loud. But no one forbade her to think a red-hot thought. This story would help her climb to the top of the journalistic Olympus. Getting a foothold in the profession, human reaction helped her. She instantly turned on the photo and video cameras on her phone, instantly typed out the news. Right now, her journalistic flair and a little hint helped her make the only right decision. Going to the party disguised as a photographer. She had taken wonderful shots and with complete impunity. Now she had to make the right choice. Most likely, it would be better to hide in the mansion, to hide and listen and see if she could record anything. She'd spotted the cops with her battered eyes earlier. Both Brandon and Stanley were familiar to her. Now the landlord had to talk to the guests again, but this time to receive from them endless wishes of support and offers of help. Powerless and devastated, we shook each hand and endured it, each touch on their own shoulder. The very last man in this mournful procession was the father of the groom. But no words of encouragement were heard from him by Mr. Joe. If security in this house is so low, Mr. Rinaldi said, when there's no one else around, should we think of uniting our capitals? What are you talking about? Matt's wheeze wore on a powerful rebuke. He had no more left. I'm doing everything in my power to find Monica. You're under the impression that she may have faked her own kidnapping, says the estranged relative. He said she wasn't sure how she felt. How dare he? Mr. Mata shouted, my daughter is the cleverest and most beautiful girl. She adores her father, and she adores you too. She wouldn't talk such nonsense. I told him the same thing, Rinaldi replied. But the smile on his face didn't please Mr. Joe. Did you also tell the kid what it means to lock in a loss? To lock in a loss? The millionaire questioned Mr. Joe, although he was well aware of such a word combination. How to fix it? Yes, yes, Rinaldi nodded. There was no longer that ingratiating tone in him. It was more confident. Kid. Unlike us, Mr. Joe never went through bankruptcy. That empty feeling when you realize you're left with nothing. But you and I have been through it. Monica's probably his first major loss. I explained to the kid that he needs to get over it. Listen to Rinaldi. Mr. Mata grabbed his visor by the jacket. We'll find her tomorrow, the day after tomorrow at the latest, and we'll play the Dan wedding. We'll build the whole coast with your skyscrapers. Do you hear, Giuseppe? Rinaldi said softly, pulling away. I said, fixing the losses with my little boy. He has fully accepted our updated strategy. Together we are going to discover new markets. Nothing personal, just business. Of course, with your abilities, we could accomplish a lot, as could you with our hands. But there is providence, and there is the voice of God. On the coast. That's what our wedding whispered. The coast is not the end of the world. In a conciliatory tone, said the construction magnate. We can do anything. I've long been ready to switch to building subways or social housing in Mexico, or building individual bomb shelters. I hear there's a huge demand for them now, like during the Cold War. Do you really think I'm doing all this to grow my empire? Didn't you? The master of the house was surprised. Not at all. Rinaldi replied, I only wanted my boy Vasco to be happy. Bless you, Giuseppe. I'm sure your daughter will return. I'm sure you can get her married. Profitable. But another time, perhaps we should ask her consent. The millionaire was completely overwhelmed. The guests, who only a few hours ago were ready to drink and eat from his hands, were leaving the mansion. Along with them, his soul was filling up, a vague sense of unease. The last time he defended it was in 2008, hours before the mortgage default kicked in. Fortunately, he was able to survive that crisis with an extremely broad portfolio of investments. Why did that pinching sense of dread overtake his soul? Now, sitting in the closet was uncomfortable. River was glad he hadn't been tempted to try all those dozens of wines and other beverages the tables at the ceremony were bursting with. Once inside the guest house, she chose the right room and decided to hide there. Finding it wasn't easy, but the landmarks helped. 20 minutes later, she heard a familiar voice. She did. The detectives and I were discussing her daughter's disappearance. Rika surreptitiously turned on the recorder and prepared to listen. One last conversation, and we'll leave you to it, Stanley said. You see, we can't escape the feeling that there's another factor. Did Brandon help him, which you're either hiding from us or deeming irrelevant? I told you where to find her. The Mata roared. Don't you see who's making my whole life go to hell? We can't break into Mister's house, Stanley said calmly, even if his nephew was here, even if he stole the dress case. Besides, Rinaldi had made no claim to the thing. Moreover, Brenton said, it might well have been a distraction. But you must agree, who would draw so much attention to themselves by stealing such a huge structure? It appeared on his forehead again. Those cheeks had already figured out everything, right down to who the ill-fated briefcase belonged to. They'd be looking for his daughter at the same rate. He hated it when anyone taught him how to work, though. Who knows if the esteemed cop is as sentimental about these matters as he is. Let's try to remember, said Detective Stanley in his calm voice. Was there anything strange on the day your daughter went missing or in the days before? Strange. Pulled. There was. Some old woman came by today. Brandon was surprised. What's so strange about it? She talked, said she had some information for me, and she asked for help, said to come down. What did she say? Asked the detective. I have no idea. The millionaire shrugged. I told her to get her out of here. You didn't remember the name, of course, the cop said. Why not? It was desperate for praise, as in the old days, when his every silly joke was met with thunderous laughter. I keep hundreds of names and numbers in my head. Detective. So name it. The name that was just rolling around on my tongue slipped away. The millionaire started snapping his fingers, as if trying to catch the words by their tails. Oh shit. What was his name? I've heard that name before. Disappointed detective tired of waiting for the resurrection in the memory of the cherished last name, and was about to leave the room with his colleague. But in the doorway, Wyatt was called out to them both. Remembered. Excitedly whispered the millionaire. Her name was Mira for the line. That's how she introduced herself when we spoke on the phone, and Anish dialed me. That was at about 4:30 p.m. Gentlemen. You see, I'm not that old yet. That's for sure. Brandon asked, scratching his chin. You're not confusing anything. No, Angry answered we are. I told you, I have an excellent memory. You wanted details. I remembered them. The thing is, said Brandon, I know this woman, or rather, these details. Well, then dig, Inspector Dig. Mr. Joe yelled, dig in that direction. Mr. Mehta, tell me honestly, are you kidding me? The journalist became suspicious. The names and surnames spoken up to that point said nothing. But when she heard the Pasolini Prize, the journalist perked up. Could she be the one? Taking out Rick's iPhone, she began to write a short note Tuck sketched. If suddenly now her hunch was confirmed, no need to demand so much from fate. Luck, of course. loves preparation, but also restraint and modesty, the very qualities that Rika could never boast of. The telephone, a journalist's main weapon, thought Rika, trying to stretch her legs. Everything here has cameras to take cool pictures, a notepad to quickly jot down a note. And then there's the internet, where you can always get the information you need. If I didn't know your boss, roared the Matt, I'd call you a puppy, for no one here. No one is allowed to say in my house that I'm bullying. If you're not bullying, that's even worse. The detective hissed. Brendan held back, but with great difficulty. To gain access to Signora, the ruin, you really had to dig. In the truest sense of the word. All because her funeral had taken place 3 weeks ago. Grandma passed away, quietly and peacefully. What can't be said for the valuables that were stored in her vintage apartment? While the old lady waited for her own nameless body to be discovered, someone took everything they could get their hands on. Brandon was on duty when the call came in. This was way out of his league and out of his specialty. After all, burglaries can be handled by rookie cops. They could be investigated by investigators with good agency or serious leads. The brand had a non-trivial reason for such a case. One of the items stolen from the old lady was a real heirloom. You see, Mr. Mehta, said the detective, I don't believe in coincidences, and there are so many in this case, it's sickening. Do you know who Measure is? Of course not. The millionaire waved his hand. I just remembered the name. And that was the name of the grandmother who wanted to see me this morning. What's the matter? You don't see. The world's behind the lines. Passed away some time ago. The old lady was well-to-do, explained the detective. She owned Martha Washington's ring. Quite officially. What's the matter? Are you sick? No. The answer is, Mister, it's paler. I'm fine. These worries are about my daughter and more. So talk to this poor collector. You see, Martha Washington's ring is a real heirloom, said Brandon. Oh, come on, I'm sorry. We're just wasting time. We got work to do. Let's go to the walls. No. Tell me, the millionaire asked. I'm very curious. What's the deal with this ill-fated ring? All right, it won't take long anyway. Brandon waved his hand. That ring is worth an insane amount of money. The entire state police are focused on finding it. Shortly before the mayor's death, the line was going to donate it to the National Museum. It was a long negotiation, but alas. And what are the penalties for a man who stole such a ring? We asked in as calm a voice as possible. I don't know. Probably, shrugged Brandon. I think that the kidnappers simply do not realize what treasure has fallen into his dirty clutches. You see, a trinket like that might be worth 1,010,000 or 20. Yeah, you could get killed for something like that. Mister, this is bad for you. The millionaire collapsed on the floor. Stanley, who had hitherto remained silent, ran up to the millionaire and grabbed him by the shoulders. Took his pulse. Everything was normal. The cops looked at each other. Mr. Jones sat up, rubbing his temples. We need to talk. Mata whispered. No time to talk to my lawyer, Brandon said gruffly. This is your daughter's life we're talking about. If you have something to say, spit it out right now. I saw that ring, said the millionaire. He was terrified that he had brought his daughter to the brink of death himself. Had you seen it? Surprised Detective Brandon. When I bought that ring. Mata whispered. You did, but I had no idea it was stolen. No idea. Then why did you buy it? Asked the cop. Don't you understand? The millionaire waved his hand. If you, like me and my parents, had been in the skin of a migrant, when I got my American passport, I swore that I would never leave this country and I would never cede it to anyone. And the ring of the wife of the first president, Hugo. Stanley smiled. And those, shall we say, antique lovers knew what they were selling you. Yes, they did. Shrugged Mata's shoulders. Oh, shit. I'm the one who told them I was going to give my daughter a gift for her daughter. The detectives looked at each other. Stanley pulled out his phone and started frantically typing something into Messenger. Brandon froze like a dog. He turned his head left and right. Then he signaled his coworker to freeze. Quietly, slowly, Brandon walked over to the new closet, swung it open. What a meeting. The girl said, looking at the millionaire, "Glad to meet you. And here I am, hiding from my employer's prying eyes. Who the hell are you?" He roared as he approached her. "I'll throw you out the window. Don't touch her, Mr. Joe," Stanley warned, grabbing the landlord by the arm. "She's a journalist. Worked for a millionaire. But give me the phone." "Late is late," smiled the girl, showing her iPhone. "Too late, because I already sent the memo. God bless America." This time, Mr. John didn't collapse to the floor, but his face became so pale you could see the patterns of blood vessels on it. America only smiled as she watched him suffer. She loved to watch the masters of life suffer. Brandon hated the press, but he was the one who had been sent in front of the press, and he didn't dare disobey orders. You have to be careful when talking to the media, even if you're leaving the force, and even more careful if you want to stay on the force. Just one wrong word, one joke, and the newspapermen will instantly hoist your detective soul on their free speech pitchforks. "Dear colleagues," said Brandon, "I am invited to make a brief statement. The police are investigating Monica's disappearance. This means a criminal trial. A huge amount of evidence has been analyzed. The department is prepared to pay a reward to anyone who has information of value to us." "Did the kidnappers make demands?" the young journalist asked. She did not identify herself. "No demands," the detective replied. "No reliable information about the details of the kidnapping." "If not a kidnapping, then what is it?" asked the Tolstoy newspaperman, twitching all his chin. "No comment," replied Brandon. He loved that word combination. "Let's say I'm a kidnapper," the young journalist said thoughtfully. "What could I expect? For leniency if you give up the police and fulfill all its requirements," said the detective with a smile. What was happening was beginning to irritate him. "More questions, Mr. Brandon." He heard a familiar voice. "Rika Smith, special correspondent. Do you confirm that there was also a theft of the national relic of Martha Washington's ring?" "I do." Brandon nodded. "But there's no need to sensationalize it. That ring was stolen 3 weeks ago. I personally put the card in the system of search for valuables. Its cultural status is also unconfirmed, since it hasn't been examined by an expert. The rest is just coincidence and your speculation." The detective immediately invited language, but it was too late. The reporters became animated, like an alligator that had been thrown a piece of meat. He saw the newspapermen rush to their gadgets to scribble notes. Not only was a millionaire's daughter missing, but also a very valuable gizmo. Was Mr. Matta involved in the disappearance of this ring? Rika asked. "In the interest of the investigation, this information is confidential," answered Brandon, although he would love to answer the omnipresent journalist indecently. "If you know where the ring is or Monica, let me know," smiled the detective. That phrase was superfluous too. "Mr. Brent, how much could such a ring be worth?" Another reporter blurted out, and the detective decided to take the opportunity to escape. 1000000, if it's real," he answered. "The press conference is over. God bless America and give us all strength." At this time, Mr. This was reading an article about himself, instantly covered in sweat. This journalist had, in fact, still a child completely buried in the ground. Not even the top of his head is sticking out. His daughter's kidnapping had taken a back seat. Turns out all of America is now talking about the millionaire who stole George Washington's ring. Angry comments flooded the newswires. Columnists exercised wit, trying to find ever more caustic language to label his failure. "Gagliano." Mr. whispered it into the phone. "Do I need you urgently?" "I'm on my way." "Encourage," replied the interlocutor. Gagliano could smell money a mile away. Not every lawyer has that kind of nose. And not everyone knows how to interpret signals correctly. Today, when he first heard that the scandal Gagliano, and immediately canceled all business meetings, postponed them for a week ahead. He went to a restaurant near Mr. Matt's residence and waited for the call. When the driver took him to the mansion, the lawyer asked him to stop at a newsstand. So he bought a fresh press, sat in the back seat of his Rolls-Royce, and began flipping through the pages. Galliano loved the smell of freshly printed newspapers. It took him back to his childhood, when he himself sold the same publications on the streets of New York for $2 a day. That's all in the past now, but the smell of fresh press still lifted his spirits. On the front page, these pages of which were to be adorned with a picture of Joe's daughter in a gorgeous dress, modeled the headline Millionaire. Tommen, how has the gentleman encroached upon the history of the states? Gagliano read the entire article and noted to himself that there was nothing to latch onto. The entire piece was built on innocent questions and official police reports. The first ring had indeed been stolen. Second, Mr. confirmed this, that the relic passed through his hairy hands. About the excessive vegetation, it's completely true. All mature Italians suffer from it. A millionaire's third daughter is missing, and he gave her rings the day before. As they say, draw your own conclusions. The only thing that caught the eye of an experienced lawyer is the word clip ataman. Galliani knew perfectly well medical diagnoses on the pages of the press cannot be published. And yet this is not enough to nail him and make him apologize. What to say about the small news sites that reprinted the news without looking into the details? It seems that by evening all America knew that it had something to do with the disappearance of some national relic. But the public didn't want to understand the rest of the details. They wanted the hot facts. The lawyer walked through the beautiful courtyard with the traces of the failed wedding. The staff of the entertainment agency was dismantling scenes, unfolding tables, assembling chairs. Guards like soldiers covered every entrance and exit to Mr. This mansion and his guest house. Gagliano nodded to one of them, whose face seemed familiar. But he didn't even see a smile in return. What caught his eye was the automatic pistol that was loaded, placed in a holster. Not one that was prepared for defense. A pass was demanded by the guard. "Gentlemen, this is waiting for me," explained the lawyer, showing his card. "Say Galliano is in place. Expect," ordered the guard and ran to his patron. That one will always be so strict now, Galliani thought, looking around. The guards were giving him unkind looks, and when one of the staff dismantled the scene, approached the mansion, almost beat him. "Where are you going?" angrily asked the hot young man. "Why are you stinking around here?" "I was looking for the restroom," the employee whispered. "What's this? A wedding or a funeral?" Rodriguez shouted. The security guard kicked the underachiever out and blacklisted him. "But I didn't do anything," screamed the hapless entertainment employee. "Let me pack my bags." "You'll get it in the mail," Rodriguez replied. "You're right. The right living his main entrance. Walk faster, or else I'll give you the acceleration now." Galliani, who had been in this hospitable house at the best of times, did not cease to be amazed. First of all, he could not believe that Giuseppe had enemies capable of stealing his daughter. For God's sake, this is America. Here any questions can be settled in court. Secondly, Galliano had never noticed such a huge number of guards. With his experienced eye, he counted 15 men. "Who are you defending yourself against?" "Mr. Galliani," the first guard called out to him, returning from a patron. "Mr. Joe is waiting for you in the library on the second floor. He said you find your own way." "Absolutely." The lawyer nodded and walked past the armed guys. The peaceful man. He hated it when they tried to settle things with guns. The tables inside the house had not yet been dismantled. They were still filled with snacks and drinks, and Galliano couldn't resist a cookie with black caviar. A compact refrigerator and a closet was set up for the treat. The lawyer only had to lift the lid and put the delicacy with a silver spoon. He loved to eat deliciously. Therefore, so many culinary masterpieces made his eyes go wild. Even a sandwich. He went up to the second floor and saw the master of the house. The gentleman was hard to look at. This large, strong man was literally hustling. Bags appeared under his eyes. He was also wiping the sweat from his forehead. Gagliano came up to him and shook his hand warmly. And then they embraced. "I'm sorry, friend," said we. "I'm sorry I didn't invite you to my daughter's wedding." "It's nothing." The lawyer waved his hand. "I think you had enough troubles not to old friends. Besides, I was supposed to have an important meeting tonight, but I canceled it." "I'm in trouble," said the millionaire. Like I didn't hear him. "You must have heard my daughter's missing, right?" "Of course I did," nodded Galliani. "I wanted to tell you right away that all negotiations should be conducted by the police. Alas, it is more difficult to negotiate with criminals than with the most rusty gambler." "No calls yet." Mata sighed. "I called you for another matter. They can't make a formal charge." The lawyer nodded. He was all too aware of the consequences if the story of this ancient ring did get spun. "We could have this arrested, and not for a token 6 months, but for a considerable period of time. This story with Washington's ring is a nightmare." Galliani said, "Did you do the right thing to call me? You could go to jail for stealing something like that. Certainly a man with Italian roots. But I didn't know." Screaming Giuseppe, "Damn it. There have been so many presidents in the history of this glorious country. How do I know some ring was stolen?" "Take it easy." Joe calmed down. It was Gagliano's lawyer whispering. "I've pulled you out of the sludge before. And this time, I'm asking you to keep your voice down." "That's it," said Joe, lowering his voice 2 times, even quieter. The lawyer asked. Through his channels, he learned that a journalist had infiltrated the house to this, under the guise of a waitress. Of course, letting so many people into his mansion was a huge risk. If he had consulted Galliani, he would have said, "The wedding should be celebrated anywhere but here, away from home." Now he had to be careful. What if another left-wing journalist overheard them? "That's it," whispered the millionaire. "Yes," agreed Galliano perfectly. "Tell me, have you been questioned?" "No," answered it. "There was a conversation with the detective, that's all. The same conversation that this journalist overheard. You see, you have to give a proper statement, don't you?" The lawyer advised me. "Say you were looking for a present for your daughter, and some adventurer offered you Martha Washington's ring, and you bought it out of pure humor for the sake of a joke, thinking that you are acquiring some kind of everywhere face, not a relic. How much did you pay?" 100,000. Answered were 100 grand. Galliani shouted. "Oh shit. No, it doesn't work like that. You paid a tenner to a tenner. Got it. Okay." The millionaire nodded. "The main thing is not to forget. Do you think I'll go to jail? If you listen to me, no." The lawyer shrugged. "When you're called in for questioning." "Tomorrow, 2:00 p.m., said we'll go together." "You ask." Gigliano chuckled. "Now you can't even pee without your lawyer. Eh? There's a way to get you out of this, even make you a hero." "How?" asked Matt. He was willing to pay a lot more than the fabulously expensive services of Gagliano to find the ring. The lawyer shrugged. "Do you think that these underachievers can really find your daughter? All rich people are the same," Brandon thought. 2:00 didn't pass before the millionaire called an incredibly expensive lawyer to pretend to solve his issues. And now this parasite from the legal world was calling his detective's personal cell phone. How did he get the number? Of course, a man like that would have to be talked to. Like it or not, there was little desire to do so. Mr. Brandon said with a smile to Galliani, starting into the video call, "I apologize for the distraction. My client and I would like to assist the investigation." "I'm listening." The detective answered only quickly and to the point. "We're still looking for Monica." That's what Mr. Joy wanted to say a few words about. The lawyer smiled. He turned the cameras on the millionaire. "Mister, it's like he's gotten older, hustling." "Detective." Brandon grinned gloatingly to himself. "The rich cry too." "No, they cry when it becomes obvious that money can't buy something. Like going back in time and righting wrongs." The detective. said it, but his voice sounded rusty. Martha Washington's ring, or rather, allegedly Martha's ring, allegedly Martha. Alleged ring. Stop wasting my time. Brandon exploded. We're not talking off the record here. Anyway, it's a goddamn ring. 2 guys brought it to me, said the millionaire. Tom, the former head of security, set me up with them. I fired him today. Brandon's used to his clients not telling him the truth. But when it comes to his daughter, maybe if he'd gotten this information a few hours ago, they'd have moved forward with the investigation by now. Brand sighed and set his tongues, singing indignation within himself. Already he had said something. What were their names? I really don't know these people's names, Matta said. Real names. We've got to remember something. Brendan exhorted him. They probably know the fate of the ring and your daughter. I saw them for the first time, replied the millionaire. He didn't write the volume. He said that some people wanted to sell me something worthwhile. I don't know why I agreed to this stupid meeting. It wasn't really like that. The head of security told me that a real relic of Martha Washington's ring had surfaced on the black market, and Mr. Matt himself was begging for a meeting to sell it. It seemed to him that if his daughter wore such a ring, not a single person in the whole country would dare to challenge his status as a U.S. citizen. One of them was named Rick, pronounced, "We are Thin Rick." Brandon shrieked. He couldn't hide his excitement. Did you guys really mess with Thin Rick? The detective found it increasingly difficult to refrain from the very unprintable expressions for which his department was famous. Think thin. That man wouldn't miss an opportunity to make a big score, and if we also showed him the money. I can see why the kidnappers didn't make any demands. They could wait days, playing a subtle game with a millionaire. That's all. Brandon asked. Or are there any other juicy details? That's it. Exhaled the millionaire. Please find my daughter. The lawyer turned the camera back to his pretty face. The detective noted to himself that this man didn't care about other people's suffering. He hadn't even changed his face when he'd asked him to find his daughter. And Thin Rick's name didn't make any impression on him. This will make the officer's investigation easier, won't it? Asked Gagliano. Of course, answered Brandon. I'll report everything to the prosecutor. Over and out. Gagliano said he would stay at Matt's mansion as long as necessary. The millionaire thanked for his concern, although he did not believe in its sincerity. However, the presence of an old acquaintance was very useful. Mr. Joe now could not relax for a second and was waiting for new blows. Leaving aside the Italian wine, the maitre d' ordered to serve him a bottle of whiskey. He began to consume this drink to recover a little, and at the same time to calculate the losses. So, the wedding of his daughter did not take place. So we can forget about reaching new financial frontiers. Convert the influence in square kilometers of offices and residential apartments will not work. Speaking of influence, after a series of scathing articles, Mr. Matta will be shunned like a leper. He's seen it here in the West. They called it ostracism, a culture, an abolitionist culture. Luckily for him, he doesn't have to get movie roles or seek contact with the crowd. So he can just leave managerial positions formally and go into the shadows, and from there he can keep pulling strings. Finally, the most important attack is the risk of ending up behind bars. We've been kicking ourselves for telling detectives about the ring without consulting Gagliano. There was no doubt that the whole thing was played by professionals. First, they forced him to buy the ring, taking advantage of his provincial complexes. Then they sent some actress disguised as an old lady. They set it up so he'd kick her out, but he'd remember her name. And then they stole his daughter. The problem is, he's Giuseppe. It's still at the mercy of unknown intruders. For now, he remains a piece on the chessboard. They continue their game and will soon want the prize money. 1,010,000 at least. That's when he'll show them what Italian integrity is all about. He'll agree to any demands, find the money, and then the wheels will turn. Not a single person will be able to avoid answering what he will do with them. Oh, at this time, A gentleman who was far inferior to us in terms of volume and capital structure was drinking whiskey on the same occasion. But unlike Mr. Joe, he was celebrating success, not counting his losses. In just 2 moves, not just to humiliate his opponent, but to destroy him. Of course, not everything went exactly as the calculating Italian had planned. Some points had to be adjusted on the fly. But revenge, the very dish that should be served cold, turned out to be really juicy. Reading the newspaper headlines and angry comments, These reveled in their victory. The only question that kept him on his toes was, where had the girl gone? He had actually thought about her kidnapping, had kept the possibility in his mind all along, and had even embedded his own man in the entourage. However, there's no way for those fools to prove anything. Therefore, Mr. Elizabeth only had to sing along with whiskey, eat pickled olives and laugh, rejoicing in his brilliant plan. He'll find the girl. As long as someone who plays his own game doesn't interfere in this story. The clock struck 12. Stanley and Brendan continued to sit in the office, analyzing the information. The kidnapping required total concentration as the clock ticked down. In such moments of peak time, one descends to the bottom of Maslow's pyramid of needs. After a week of work at the reel, Stanley was ready to sell his soul for a hot shower and a bed with fresh linen. That's the reason he's quitting. And Brandon seemed to be able to endure any hardship, not a man but a machine. He held a complex dialogue with 3 informants at once. This job was like a chess game with several opponents at the same time. And Brendan was nearing the endgame, moving into the endgame. He's about to checkmate and checkmate at the same time. Bingo, shouted the detective. I found her. Who? Stanley was surprised. Our girl, answered Brandon. But it's gonna cost me a lot of money. Oh well, let's get in the transport. We're gonna get her. Just the 2 of us? Stanley asked. Are you crazy? Let's call in a SWAT team for force support. I've got 2 flak jackets in the trunk, Brandon shrugged, and a shotgun. You can take the helmet if you want. I'm not going anywhere, Stanley cut him off. I've already dropped a support request from mine. Brandon smiled. Or I'll go alone. With those words, he slipped his jacket over his shoulders and rushed out the door. Stanley cursed, put his hat on his head, and ran after him. Brandon, in spite of his stature, was moving very righteously. Stanley rushed after him on his long legs, cursing his partner. Where'd you get the information? He asked. And what's the rush? From an informant, answered Brandon. We got about 20 minutes, no more. The detectives drove through the night city, both the Buick and Brendan literally swallowing up the kilometers. He was accelerating at an obscene speed, and Stanley prayed they didn't hit some pole or manhole. Where are we going? Stanley asked. Let's go easy on the warehouses, Brendan replied. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed his partner patting his pockets. Did you forget your cell phone? Stanley nodded. Oh, shit. This is all your fault. While we were running down the stairs, I dropped the boss, Brandon replied. Didn't you get Churko off in time? Stanley was silent. They drove into some kind of industrial development. In the dark, the detective couldn't recognize the place anyway. Brandon turned off the engine. Quietly, without slamming the doors, they walked to the trunk. Brand handed him the body armor helmet and picked up the shotgun himself. Tell me honestly, Stan said, what's your deal with the river? What? The detective snapped at him. Did we come here for the girl or what? Brandon answered, smiling slyly at the girl. We're after Warehouse 48. That's what the informant said. Out of the corner of his eye, Brandon saw Stanley slam himself back into his pocket to get his cell phone. The detective smiled. That's how it is. You live with a man for years, and he's a two-faced rat, ready to sell you out for 30 dimes, or something even cheaper. Didn't you tell the river where we were going to torture our millionaire? Brandon continued, filling the shotgun with ammo. She would never have guessed it herself. Go to hell, said Stanley. I didn't do anything, and you hid my phone. I didn't. No. Brandon smiled, adjusting his armor, which barely fit his large belly. Just put it in a drawer so you forget it. And now what? Stanley asked. You gonna turn me in? No, worse, said his partner. We find the girl. I'll file a report and go back to your corrupt journalists. He jerked the bolt spectacularly, putting a cartridge in the snick, though the movement was unnecessary. Brandon already knew he wouldn't have to shoot, but he wanted to impress Stanley and show what a beautiful world he was losing. Real male friendship instead of fried facts, instead of stray coins. Something more expensive, a sense of mutual support and respect. Follow me, Brandon ordered, turning on the flashlight on his shotgun. Together, they stole from around the underground level. Warehouse 48 wasn't hard to find. There was a strip of light shining out from under the door, and someone was playing music inside. Perfect place to rehearse. There was no one around at this time of day. The nearest apartment buildings were miles away. As he got closer and closer to the cherished warehouse, Brandon began to worry that the informant had deceived him. He could hear the gentle strumming of guitars and charming duets of male and female voices. Stanley fell behind. What a rat thought Brendan hadn't even left yet, and already he was starting to care so much about his own ass. The detective crept to the steel door and slipped his finger in the gap between them for a word push and stepped back. The door began to open slowly, as if a gust of wind had propelled it. The voices died down. Brandon heard footsteps from deep inside the warehouse. Someone was coming to close the door. It made sense, and as the man's hand moved out in search of the handle, the detective nimbly grabbed it, twisted, and pulled it toward him. Handcuffs. Stan shouted. Brendan, Stan, handcuffs. Dan, you to hell. The clock read 8. Tough morning. Up in bed as early as yesterday. At this time, Mr. Mata thought he was the ruler of the world. He made plans. He was going to grow his capital to obscene levels, and today he's sitting in his underwear on a silk sheet, trying to grasp the shadow of the passing day. So first, let's count the losses. George Rossi called their longtime friendship a mistake and asked not to bother him again. Charles Bianchi publicly disavowed the awarding of a multi-million-dollar contract. Giovanni Greca called to apologize, and for a long 5 minutes told why this conversation would be the last. Luca Moretti ordered a column in 5 leading media outlets on the coast to angrily denounce his former business partner. So it is in all mortal sins, but he had a less than pleasant conversation with Mr. Rinaldi yesterday. Add to that a dozen other, not financial sharks, but a little smaller fish, which yesterday rushed away from him. Yeah, it's time to declare bankruptcy. No, he's got some savings. Enough to live comfortably, enough to travel. He'll have to keep 2 or 3 of the security detail down to the secretary. It's a girl with a funny name of Alex. He liked it, just as long as she doesn't go telling the media about harassment right now. No, she's not. But his biggest loss was Monica, his daughter, his greatest treasure. Still out of reach. What if the mysterious kidnappers found out what relic he gave her and thought the ransom was a lie? Or now they're going to try to screw him over for a sum he doesn't have. There was another possibility. Let the minuscule that the daughter was found just shy of calling early in the morning or did not want to tell the terrible news. Mr. Id remembered that Detective Brenton left his phone and urged to call almost any time of day or night. Well, 800 hours is the legal time to call. He dialed the number, and the cop picked up the phone the second he did. Did you find my daughter? No preamble, asked Mr. Matt. In just one day he had lost so much of what he held dear. Yes, answered Brandon, briefly. Found. Then why did Mr. Mitta whisper? Why didn't you call? At 200 hours, you showed up for questioning. The detective was lazy. That's when you'll find out. She's alive. The millionaire asked fearfully. Fortunately, yes, replied the detective. No more comments on the phone. The receiver beeped, and the connection was cut off. It threw the expensive phone into the wall in a rage. The iPhone bounced on the parquet, and like a frog jumped several times. The screen was covered with a network of cracks, shouted he, and to me ran. When the frightened girl ran into the bedroom, he said, "Call that rascal, call him right now. Wait a minute, call him in a few minutes. Come here, darling, I've got something to do." "I'm listening." Says, "Mister, if I find out it was you who hissed, that's if I find out it was me." Calmly replied my nemesis, "I. Who else was ever going to hear someone? If I called you, don't play games with me. You kidnapped my daughter." The millionaire stretched angrily. "You planted that ring on me, but you're like a child. I'm not going to talk to you on the phone. Unlike you, Joe, I know all too well the kind of cells that chatty businessmen go to. If I find out you're the one who whispered it, that you set this whole thing up, oh my God, you really don't know anything." I was surprised. "No," Joe answered, completely confused. "And about my nephew, too?" Asked his date. "No, but then quickly go to the main entrance of your pseudo-American mansion. Come on, let's go before it's too late." And hung up. We thought it would be very Italian to shoot him when he's alone and unprotected in such an open place. But he wasn't afraid of death anymore. Why would he want a world without his daughter? And the capital that made a descendant of immigrants with a family name. That's Mr. He staggered across the courtyard of his mansion. The place hadn't been cleaned up after last night's wedding invasion. There were napkins, plastic bottles, leftover dishes, and engraved spoons lying around. The jam he'd ordered the day before. The guards looked away and pretended to be extremely busy bums. And so he reached the main entrance to his estate, swung open the entry gate, spread his arms out to shout, "Shoot. Well, already I'm all yours." But there was no minibus, not even a scooter where a machine gunner could sit. Only on the grass in front of the gate lay a small box. He picked it up and put it in his pocket, though it might well have been a bomb. He walked back into the house, sat down on the sofa, and opened it. In the box was his daughter's ring, or rather Martha's ring to Washington, and a small letter. The millionaire unfolded it and read it aloud. "And no one kidnapped me. I'm fine. And I'm happy. P.S. Go to hell, bye."